So there are many different kinds of Tesla investors. Those who are short-term traders saw the Q3 Tesla earnings call as a disaster, but those who are long-term, they didn't really flinch much at all. So today we have Warren Redlich with us. He is a self-described Uber bull who has a very refreshing way to look at the company and its results. Welcome, Warren.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Herbert. Love talking to you.
So Warren has his own YouTube channel, Warren Reglich, and I've had it on him before. We talked about his investing philosophy and style. So I wanted to ask him, with the Q3 earnings call coming out, and most people, I think the consensus by most investors is that it was a disaster. How did you see it as your perspective as a long-term bull, somebody who doesn't really care so much? You've said this many times about the short term, every 3 months, every 6 months look, but what was your reaction to the Q3 earnings?
I didn't think that the negatives that people are talking about were surprising at all. I think we knew in advance because they published their production and delivery numbers. We knew production and deliveries were down, so that's not particularly surprising. But when you look at the long-term issues like 4680 progress, Drew Baglino, all the people who are critical of Tesla ignored what Drew Baglino said about 4680, which is the new battery that Tesla is developing that will go in Cybertruck and later in Tesla Semi, that is 46 millimeters in diameter and 80 millimeters high, that they increased production quarter on quarter 40%. They reduced scrap quarter on quarter 40%. That means they're rapidly increasing volume of production, and they're rapidly reducing or rapidly improving efficiency of production by reducing scrap. Then they're building a new version of the cell on line 2, which is called the Cyber Cell, that's 10% more energy dense, which means you get more range out of the same battery. And they're shifting to produce the Cyber Cell on line 1 and line 2. And there's lines 3 and 4, and I believe they're going to be producing the Cyber Cell now on all 4 lines. And they're investing to build 4 more lines that will come online, I think, late 2024 or sometime in 2025, which means they're going to radically, and when you combine, we're producing faster, we're producing more efficiently, and we're about to 4x and then 8x our lines of production, you're going to get a lot more battery production, and that's going to enable a lot of vehicle production. So that was a really big story that I think I'll call it, you can call it short-term traders, I'll call it the whiners. That's a story I think missed. That was a really big deal. As far as I can tell, nothing really changed. The biggest other big news that I saw was Cybertruck. We actually have a Cybertruck delivery date. Everyone's waiting. When is Cybertruck coming? When is Cybertruck coming? When is Cybertruck coming? I guess the negative news, if you can call it negative news, is they are growing the current lines of vehicles that they produce, the Model 3 and Model Y in particular. Model Y in particular, I guess I would say, they very clearly said growth will be very gradual at Giga Texas. We're not going to increase production in Shanghai. Growth will be gradual like Texas in Berlin. So we do not expect a lot of growth in Model Y in the next 6 to 12 months, let's say. And then they didn't say anything about Model 3. I think we are going to see significant growth in Model 3 with the refresh, which I called wrong. To be clear, I called it wrong. I said there was not going to be a refresh. I was wrong. But it sounds like they do expect to grow Model 3 production. But Q4 will not be dramatically large growth compared to, let's say, Q2. They did, guide to not just 1.8 million vehicles produced in 2023, which I think was their guidance before was production. They are now guiding to deliveries close to 1.8 million vehicles, which is actually an increase from what I expected before. I think that means 476,000 deliveries in Q4. That may be over optimistic, but maybe they fall a little short of that. They turn impossible into late, So I think there's some, if you can call that a negative, that's still, the way they put it, that's still ahead of the 50% average annual growth dating back to 2020, when they produced 500,000 vehicles. They would need to produce a little under 1.7 million vehicles in 2023, or deliver a little under 1.7 million vehicles in 2023 to continue that 50% average annual growth. Since they're going for 1.8 million, they're actually ahead of the curve for this year. my gut, they didn't give a number, and they said they're going to give us guidance at the end of Q4, is that 2024 will not maintain the 50% average annual growth. So when you're looking at 2024, you'd need 2.5 million vehicles to sustain the 50% average growth. And I think, maybe we're going to get 2.2 or 2.3 million vehicles in 2024. So you're going to
Yeah.
see a delay in growth.
Well,
So
that's the crux, I think, right? So I think the issue wasn't what's going to happen in 2023. It's the somber projection of what's going to happen in 2024, if you see it that way, because he did kind of say that we're not going to put the pedal to the metal to build out these factories until I know better what's going to happen to interest rates. And so people are now calculating out that their margins for 2024 is going to be flat or maybe even lower. Maybe they won't hit the 2.3 million. They're not, there's concern about maybe not building out the Model 3 in Mexico until he sees better. So it was just his kind of like dire statements about the future. What's your opinion about that? And tell me more about how you saw the margin play and the margin story. And then, of course, I think he used those words about the Cybertruck being, we dug our own grave. What was your interpretation when you heard that?
So, well, first of all, on margins, it's not surprising that margins are facing pressures because they face pricing pressure because of interest rate. It's just comical that somebody, James Catt, one of the negative nannies, said, "Oh, that's nonsense that macro or interest rates are causing making cars less affordable." It's like, no. Interest rates 18 months ago, federal funds rate was 0.2%. Federal funds rate now is 5.33%. That dramatically raises car payments when you increase car loan rates. And also they're increasing volume. So you're increasing volume into a higher, a bad economy. That's a challenge. So I'm sorry, I think I lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Margin compression you said was
Margin.
pretty. Yeah.
Let me talk about margins. So yeah, I mean, margins are down. I don't think anybody's surprised that margins are getting compressed, but I think their gross auto margin is still like 16, 17%. Total gross margin was over 17%. And there's a bright spot. Again, I left out one of the bright spots. Energy storage revenue increased, costs actually decreased. Gross margin in energy went up to 24%. Well, auto is not growing fast, but energy is growing like 200% a year. So if we're doing 4 gigawatt hours of energy storage a quarter now, and really the capacity of Lathrop is 10 gigawatt hours a quarter, and you've got the Shanghai mega factory under construction, and we know things happen fast in Shanghai. So we're going to start seeing megapacks pumped out of Shanghai. By the end of 2024, we're going to be past 10 gigawatt hours a quarter. And then the margins are probably going up because the margins have been rising in energy. No one wants to talk about that. The bears don't want to talk about that because Tesla's just a car company, right? But they did $1.8 billion in revenue for the quarter, 1.8 billion dollars in revenue for the quarter in energy. If that's growing, if that's tripling every year, well, you're starting to look at a pretty significant business there. And if the margins in that business are growing, and let's say the margins in Megapack go to 30%, well, that becomes a significant factor that you can ignore at your peril. And then, so there's this negativity. Look, Elon didn't make interest rates go up. Elon isn't causing the economic problems that we're seeing. He's simply telling us the cold hard truth that, we got 2+ wars going on right now. I think we may be close to a third war. Those aren't good for people making decisions about when you think about buying a car and you think, wow, we got wars going on and the economy's not great. Maybe this isn't the time to buy a new car. And that's just a harsh reality about life in the world. And he doesn't pull punches. He tells us he calls it how he sees it. And it's not new. It's not like he hasn't been saying this about the economy, about wars and interest rates. He's been saying this on X all along. So, and who was it? There was somebody who was saying, I think it was Tesla Boomer Papa, was saying, this is your chance to communicate with the general public. Like, the general public isn't listening to earnings calls. It's nerds like you and me that are listening to earnings calls, right? It's Wall Streeters and retail investors. And, the average Joe on the street, if a Kardashian isn't involved or an NBA player isn't involved, they're not watching, right? It's not related to sports, and it's not related to Kardashians
Yep.
and makeup. Like the general public isn't watching the earnings call and going, "Oh no, Elon's grim about the economy. I better change my behavior and I better not buy a car." That's not what's going on. So yeah, I just think that there's this story that when you've told a story for a while, when you're Gary Black and you've told a story for a while, that Tesla needs to advertise and you just keep saying things like, well, they need to get to work on the $25,000 car. Like they aren't. Like they talked about the next generation vehicle, which by the way, I may be
Mhm.
wrong again. It's a
Mhm.
$20,000 car. It's not a $25,000 car. We'll see who's right and who's wrong. We'll know in a couple of years whether I'm right about that. I think you're going to see versions of it under 20,000 in China,
Mhm.
but it's and maybe in the US as well. But as if they didn't talk about it. And I thought they said some really positive things about the next generation vehicle. Like you mentioned Cybertruck, and they said we dug our own grave. I think that was an engineering grave. Of
Yeah.
we gave ourselves a lot more work than we realized we were giving ourselves, and doing this like crazy thing. And I will say, like when I went to Cyber Rodeo, I was talking with a battery engineer up on the fourth floor where the battery lines are. And I said, what I would go around the factory and I would ask Tesla employees, what are you excited about for the future?
Mhm.
Easily half of the Tesla employees I talked to, and this is back like a year or two ago now, right? Easily half of the employees, they were so excited about Cybertruck. And some of these people are people who actually know what's going on with Cybertruck. And they're excited about Cybertruck. Like the employees are excited about Cybertruck. You can hear it in their voices that, it's really hard for us to make it, but this thing is going to be amazing. This is the best product we've ever made. I don't think that's negative. I think saying this is the best product we've ever made is a negative thing to say. So, but behind that, the complexity of manufacturing Cybertruck, because it's a completely different type of vehicle, because they really decided, let's change the category. Let's give it 14 inches of suspension travel. Like that sounds like a lot to me. I'm not sure. I think my Model X Plaid has like 2 or 3 inches of suspension travel. So, and I noticed it. I can go from very low to very high, and I can see the difference. But 14 inches of suspension travel. That sounds, I don't know how useful that is in daily life. Like, I don't know if the soccer mom cares that it has 14 inches of suspension travel, but there's going to be people who value that. But that next generation vehicle, I think part of what they said was muffled, like the audio didn't work during the earnings call. But I definitely heard them say, well, that's going to be a lot easier for us to
Yes.
manufacture.
They
And
did.
and this is the thing, when you're looking at the future, Cybertruck, they're talking about maybe 250,000 units a year in 2025, which is, I'm hoping they go for a lot more than that. But okay, even if they get to 1 million units a year of Cybertruck, which would be comparable to Ford F-150, that's nothing compared to what the next generation vehicle is going to do. I think the next generation vehicle is going to be like 8 million units a year. I think you're going to see 2 million units, not in 2025, right? But in 2028. And that's the real future of the company. From the vehicle perspective, the future of the company is the next generation vehicle. And what I heard was they're very confident that they're going to be able to manufacture that vehicle in
Mhm.
high volume at low cost and really deliver a product that will reach a large number of people.
Yeah.
I heard a lot
Yeah,
of
they
confidence.
said yeah, they said that the next gen vehicle is, they can use Giga Texas. So even though they decided to not go all in on Giga Mexico, doesn't mean that they're necessarily delayed. They can just expand Giga Texas. They said it's utilitarian, which means, it's going to be something that's cool, but it's going to be, simple. And it's based on a normal car kind of model. So nothing brand new because it's utilitarian. So less chance. And then I agree with you about Cybertruck. I think people are overreacting to his statements. If you know Elon, if you read the book, he is right now deep in production hell for Cybertruck right now. And so his mind right now is, I got to get this fixed. But we also know that Elon, when he focuses on things, he gets it fixed. So I'm not sure that this is like they discovered something that was, you know, uh, something they didn't expect. It is something that he would have happened with any car. Yes, this is more difficult because it's 10,000 parts of new parts they've never done. Brand new car. They overdid it just like they did with Model X Skull Wings, or what do they call that? The Falcon Wings.
Falcon
But
Wing.
I don't think it meant that, oh my God, the whole company's in trouble now. It's like he said, 18 months. That's not terrible that it's going to take us 18 months. That's what his focus is. I want to get this to scalable and all that. So I think that people have overthought thought that, and I don't know who actually thought that the Cybertruck is going to contribute to margins sooner, and that was going to save the company's margin or anything. That I think what you said was correct, which is um, um, energy, and then was the compact car delayed or not? And I don't think it was. In fact, but some people interpret that as if it's been delayed because of his comments about Mexico.
No, Mexico. There was a decision made, and this was in the
Book.
biography that Elon made the decision that they're going to focus early production in Giga Texas because he wants the early manufacturing to be done where the engineers are, so the engineers can walk the production line and see the impact of their engineering decisions. And if it was in Giga Mexico, it would be removed from where the engineers are. So they decided not to make Giga Mexico the first production site. That doesn't mean they're not going to produce in Giga Mexico. They said they're going ahead with building building the infrastructure. I think they said they're developing infrastructure for the factory, and they're going to start construction of the factory. And don't forget, nobody mentioned this. Giga Berlin is expanding. They filed permits to expand Giga Berlin to produce 500,000 more vehicles. You think that's going to be Model Y? No, that's going to be the next gen vehicle. They're producing next gen vehicle in Berlin as well. And probably it would be hard to imagine they're not going to produce next generation vehicle in China. You know, they're almost certainly planning to manufacture next gen vehicle in China.
Mm-hmm.
China's probably a bigger market for next gen vehicle than North America by a significant amount. So I think that people are missing that story. And they're missing the Megapack story as well. That if you're looking for Q4 or Q1 of 2024, yeah, I suppose you're going to be disappointed if your goal is, well, I want to see earnings per share up in Q1 of 2024. Well, that's not, and this is the thing that, like, are you investing in Tesla because you're looking at the long-term future and you're looking at the mission? Or are you investing in Tesla because you want to see higher earnings per share next quarter? If you're looking for a company that's going to produce reliable earnings per share next quarter, then Tesla's not the company you should be investing in. That's not why long-term investors buy Tesla stock. We buy Tesla stock because we see the mission. The mission is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, and that requires pumping out an incredibly high volume of vehicles, right? It requires figuring out how to save pennies. I thought the game of pennies discussion, people were saying it was dark. Like, I heard them laughing. They were laughing about the game of pennies. They were laughing about the Cybertruck production hell, right? We dug our own grave. That wasn't like, oh, dark and scary. It was like they were laughing about how much money they made for themselves. It's Andre Karpathy's joke about Project Vacation, right? When they get the training working well enough, then the software engineers can go on vacation. They keep making their lives difficult, and they make their lives difficult because they're trying to save every penny they can so that they can make the cars more affordable, and they're trying to make everything more manufacturable and make better products that are going to make life better for people. And if you stay focused on that mission, then 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to see higher profits. And I feel like there wasn't really a lot about FSD. Elon talked about baby AGI. That was my favorite. Again, that was one of my favorite funny moments, calling it baby AGI. So many people were like, "Oh, it was dark Elon." I'm like, I didn't hear dark Elon. I heard.
Let me push back there. So let's talk about that right now. So people accuse you, you specifically, because you're an Uber bull and people like you, as that Elon accolades. Nothing Elon can say or do is terrible. Then on the other side, which is funny, I love this. You call the other side, the people with the STE disease, smarter than Elon. Because I always like to say, do you think that Elon and Tesla did not calculate the simple math it takes to see whether or not advertising is better than, or how much more they will be able to get at advertising? Apparently they didn't realize, like you calculated, that the price cuts is billions of dollars of impact, but somehow they didn't do that math. I mean, of course they did that math. They know it, and they're making a decision strategically or otherwise. But, so let's talk about that, because you just said that you didn't think that Elon was dark Elon. I mean, he was dark Elon. This was a very different earnings call. He's okay. Here's my position, and I'll say it quickly because I want to hear your opinion on this, which is, normally in every other earnings call, he's very straightforward. He says what he believes, which I think I love. I like that. I'd rather have a leader says things as it is, but he always couched it with something that's, here's an amazing thing that's about to happen, and we're doing amazing things. He did that again this time, but it just fell flat. And it partly his tone. He talked about baby AGI. He talked about robotaxi going to be, hard or more of a software margin. He talked about bot being able to do ballet, but none of those hit as they usually do. And so then it became overrun by the negative, dark Elon. I mean, he was really dark about the future. And so tell me why you think he wasn't dark Elon.
I don't think it's new that Elon has said, what we're spending on, that interest rates being high is a problem, and interest rates are at their peak. So, that's a problem for people trying to sell cars. And, people are saying, oh, Tesla's cutting prices. Other car companies aren't cutting prices. I just posted this. 2 days ago, Hyundai reduced their lease price on Hyundai Ioniq 6 and Hyundai Ioniq 5. They're lowering prices. If you're not growing production, if you're not trying to sell more cars, maybe you don't have to lower prices. But if you're trying to sell more cars, you have to lower prices. So I don't know. Maybe I listened to Elon too much, but I didn't hear anything that negative that he hasn't said before. He's been critical about interest rates going up for months. For months, he's been critical about that, and he's been saying this is challenging for businesses, and not just for Tesla. This is challenging for other businesses as well. So, it's not Tesla's the only company that's, and that's the other thing that people miss is like, okay, Tesla publicly lowers prices because it's on the website. That doesn't mean that other car companies aren't secretly lowering prices by giving dealer incentives and other things going on, or they're cutting back production, and so they're able to sustain their higher prices. But long-term, cutting production is not a solution. So I don't know. I heard a lot of positives. Like I said, I think, Drew Baglino isn't sunshine and rainbows when he talks, but if you can hear 40% growth quarter on quarter in 4680 cell production and 40% quarter on quarter reduction in scrap, and you don't hear how many pennies that saved and how many more cars that produces, if you don't hear that, then you're and I'll say this, like, I think that I'll pick on Gary Black in particular. I genuinely believe that Gary does not understand Tesla, the company. I don't think he understands the difference between a 4680 cell and a 2170 cell and an 1865 cell. I don't think he understands the difference between a nickel cathode and an iron cathode. I don't think he understands the difference between Tesla FSD and Mercedes level 3, 4 thing that drives like on 0.3% of roads at less than 40 miles an hour when it's following a car. Like, I think he genuinely does not understand the distinction. I don't think he understands what it means to have 400,000 cars on the road generating data. Well, it's really 5 million cars on the road generating data, and having a supercomputer cluster that can process this data, and how more data, more compute leads to better results. And what are stacked log curves? How many people understood the stacked log curves comment? Right?
Right.
He's explaining really deep things about how the business. That's the first time I've heard the stacked log curves comment. I asked James Dalma about it. James Dalma had a really good response to it. Check that out on my post on X and James Dalma's reply. That stacked. He said stacked. Why he's always talking about exponentials. A log curve is different, and James is like, well, no, the exponential is the stacked log curves. The individual log curve is not exponential, but when you start stacking log curves, it becomes exponential. And I think that kind of description of the technology that they're developing, the things that they're doing to achieve the goals, I think that's all super positive. But if you go in with a mindset, like, look, if you went into this earnings call expecting that production and delivery numbers were actually going to be 20% higher than what they reported 17 days ago, and margins were going to go up in the face of higher interest rates affecting and pricing we know came down, then you're just not paying attention. By the way, I do have criticisms of Elon occasionally. I think there's a chart in the shareholder deck that shows cost of goods sold per vehicle declining, and I think most of that chart is accurate, but the decline from Q2 to Q3 is probably mostly explained by a reduction in volume of Model S and Model X, which are the highest margin, the highest cost of goods sold vehicles. Because there's only like a drop of $300 per vehicle from Q2 to Q3. And I criticized that. I pointed that out on a post on X. And I disagree with Elon on some policy issues like universal basic income. I'm not afraid to disagree with Elon when I disagree with him on something. But when it comes to how they run the company, I will say my opinion. And I've done this multiple times. I'll say, well, this is what I think Tesla should do. But it's possible that the Tesla team knows more about this than I do. Let me give you an example. They've got this next generation vehicle, which the best sense I have is it's going to be in the ballpark of a Toyota Corolla or a RAV4 in size.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here in Japan. In Japan, half the market is cars that are significantly smaller than the Corolla. It's called K cars, KEI, for K means light. And from a gas engine side, maximum engine size is 660 cc's, which is far smaller than any engine in any car in America today, and smaller than many motorcycle engines. It's smaller than a 750cc motorcycle engine. So I don't think, and I think that size, that class of car is very common in Japan. It's common in India. It's common in a lot of countries in the world. And I don't think that the next generation vehicle, from what we know about it, addresses that segment of the market, of the global market. And I think Tesla needs to get there. And I've commented, I don't think I'm necessarily critical of Tesla, but I'm sitting here in Japan. They sell 500 cars a month in Japan. They sell 50,000 cars a month in China. Something needs to change in Japan so Tesla can sell cars here. Because if you want to get to 20 million vehicles, then India and Japan are battling for the third largest car market in the world right now. If you're not selling cars in India and you're not selling cars in Japan, I don't know how you get to 20 million vehicles a year. So I think there are challenges. I'm not saying I know better than Tesla. I think that those are things that they probably will succeed in. But, the idea that Warren never says anything critical of Elon or Tesla, like, no, I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting here in Japan. I see BMWs. I see occasional Teslas. I see BMWs, Mercedes, and Porsches all the time. Tesla needs to do something different in Japan to sell cars. And I don't necessarily know what the answer is, but I'm not afraid to say where I think, hey, they could do something better here.
Okay. So first of all, we are all investors in Tesla. And then there's the institutional investors, of which Gary represents that. And then there's the people who look at, okay. And then there's people who look at the investment and they're afraid of, they'll go, okay, this is a car company first and foremost. And the car company, an electric vehicle, the secular growth of electric vehicle, while still true, it's not true for the next year because of just the margin compression, the macro that's happening. And so now it's become back to a story stock where now we're saying, hey, just wait until there's an FSD licensing, wait until there's a robot, wait until the energy business grows. But the actual car company itself, business, until you get the Gen 3, until you get the Cybertruck out, which is going to now, it seems to be, in their minds, flat for next year. That's what they're doing, right? They're talking about that. But I'm more like you, of course. So long-term investors, I look at the business, look at the products, very happy with the progress of where we're going. Oh, that's great. But how do you weather the storm? What's advice do you have? I know that you had the story about your friend asking you about how do you weather the storm, because you always say, well, I'm 2030. Not everybody can do what you're doing, which is I don't plan to sell till 2030. Many people are certainly worried about their investment this year. So what's your advice for them?
Well, if you're investing because you're going to need the money this year, let's say you're going to need the money in 2024, then Tesla's not the stock for you, and I never told you it was.
Yeah.
If you are investing for 2030 and beyond, then Tesla's the best investment you can make, in my opinion. Not financial advice, blah blah blah, all these disclaimers. I don't see a better investment for myself. And I think if you have that long-term view and you're just saying, well, I'm not selling any stock tomorrow, I'm not selling any stock next week, then why does the price matter? So there are people who can't handle the volatility. It is very unquestionably a volatile stock. The stock goes up, the stock goes down. There's all kinds of influences on the stock. Fast-growing companies are going to have more volatility. So if you want to invest in a boring company that is going to produce reliable earnings per share every quarter where their variance is going to be very small, then buy utility stocks, right? You buy stocks in companies that sell things like electricity to homeowners, or cable television companies or something like that. But if you want to invest in somebody that's changing the world and that's going to grow their company 10x or more from where it is today, there aren't really more reliable options than Tesla for that kind of growth. And if you currently have, so I'm over $1 million in Tesla stock, and I'm expecting my stock to 10x or more by 2030. And I honestly think it might be a lot more than that. And I think that the bear case is still pretty good, as long as you go out a few years. If you are, because look, vehicle production in 2030 should be in the ballpark of 10x of what it is today. Energy should be in the ballpark of 100x of where it is today, maybe 50x. At some point, I think we're going to see FSD deliver. At some point, we're going to see Optimus, delivered and changing the world. And so I think a 10x is a reasonable, approximation of what's going to happen. I think a reasonable base case of what's going to happen in the next 7 years. So if that's what you want, then that's what you want. But it doesn't come without volatility. And I remember I had a family member who had a huge chunk of money in like a savings account, getting like 0.5% interest. And I suggested putting the money in an ETF on the S&P 500.
Mhm.
And they sold in a week because they couldn't handle the volatility of the S&P 500.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you can't handle the volatility of the S&P 500, then Tesla's definitely not the stock for you, and it's not an investment for you. You really shouldn't be buying stocks at all. But if you just have the attitude like, look, and you have to believe, like, I can't expect everybody to have looked at Tesla as deeply as I've looked at it, as deeply as you've looked at it, as deeply as Stephen Mark Ryan and Rob Maurer and Dave Lee have looked at it. If you take the time to look deeply into what the company is doing, what happened for me was I developed conviction. Okay, I think I see where the future is going with this company. I have a really strong sense of, and I see a lot of evidence. Like, I'm here in Japan right now, and if you read Japanese news articles about what's going on, they're not just Toyota, but I live in Nagoya, which is sort of the hometown of Toyota. People are terrified. They see the train coming. Right? They see the Tesla train coming. They see that Tesla is going to demolish the existing auto industry. And the question is, how do we survive in the face of this oncoming train? And if they see it, right? If this is like Toyota Central, if they see it coming, then how do you not see it coming? And the reason is you don't see it coming because it's not about to destroy your house, right? The Japanese see this is a wrecking ball coming for our industry, right? It's not just a wrecking ball for Toyota. Toyota has a supply chain. Like, this whole end area is like, supply chain for Toyota, and it's a major issue, and they see it coming. So if you see that train coming, and this, you mentioned it's a car company. It's like, is Apple a phone company? Maybe I'm missing something. Is Apple a phone company? Can we agree that Apple's a software company? Tesla sells hardware that
It took
runs.
obviously, I was all in Apple for a long time, and it took years, decade basically, before people started saying it's not a phone company anymore. It's a services company. Once services hit 10-15% of their revenue and they saw it was growing, now clearly people realize it's an ecosystem company. But like, they don't care anymore if the phone is flat, because they see services just continue to skyrocket anyways,
Did you
and
buy the
that's what's
first iPhone?
I did,
Did you
yeah.
buy?
I
Okay,
I
I
did,
bought
yeah.
the first iPhone.
Yeah.
I
I still
remember
have
when
it.
I had the handspring Treo. Before it was Palm, it was handspring. I had the handspring
Yeah.
Treo,
I had the palm.
and people were laughing at me. Oh, look at Warren with this little thing, right? And you and I were early adopters,
Yeah,
and we
I'm an
saw it.
early
I was
adopter.
an early adopter. You bought Apple early. I bought
Mhm.
Amazon early. We start to see at certain points, like,
Yeah.
I regret I actually sold Apple at a certain point. Like, I don't think I had the perspective I have now of thinking about, is this a game-changing innovation? Like, I think when the iPhone came out, if I had done a deep dive into that, I would have gone all in on Apple at that point. If I
Well,
understood if I
the
understood all in
point
investment.
the point though is that you don't look at the company based on the product. You start with the product, but then you look at it based on the company and its innovation. And if you don't see that it's going to innovate beyond just the product, then you're going to go, okay, what is this market like? But you see that you can all imagine what Steve Jobs is doing with his plan, strategic plan for 5 to 10 years from now, and
Yeah.
that's what you're investing in. So you had this post that you said that if margins is not the metric that you think is most important for long term, what do you think it is?
Well, so no, my point was that short-term margins are not the metric that investors should care about.
Okay.
The I don't know that metric is the word I would use. I think you want to look at what does the future look like? What vehicle production and deliveries do I expect in 2030? What energy production and and uh, and revenue do I expect in 2030? What do I expect for self-driving and for bot? And the margins are going to come when the software cracks the nut. And we don't know when the software is going to crack the nut. We don't know when all of a sudden I've been driving. I'm currently not driving because I live in Japan and I don't have a car here. But I've driven about 50,000 miles on Tesla, one form or another of FSD or autopilot. And I see that it's not perfect, but it's a game changer, and I see that it's improving. And it's like when my moment with Amazon in 2013. I'm sorry, I'm not necessarily answering your question directly, but in 2013, I realized I was addicted to Amazon.
Hmm.
I realized I'm an early adopter. I'm checking the Amazon website every day for deals.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot more people like me, like Amazon Prime subscribers who all of a
Hmm.
sudden like I want to buy something, and I still buy stuff from Amazon when I can. In Japan, Amazon's great in Japan, by the way. So I saw that and I said, well, a lot of other people are going to do this, and then I ended up buying Amazon stock, and I wasn't
Yeah.
yet of the all-in investing philosophy yet, but I saw that. I think I saw it with Apple with the iPhone, but I didn't see it as an investor the way I should have.
Hmm.
And so now I see it with Tesla that it's not that I can I mean, I have my own ballpark of where I see things going in 2030 of, well, if you're making less than 2 million vehicles this year and you're going to make close to 2 million vehicles in 2030, well, that's a 10x. If you're doing uh, basically you're on pace for 16 gigawatt hours a year of energy storage in 2023, and you're heading towards, a terawatt hour of energy storage, which is 1,000 gigawatt hours in 2030. Well, and it's probably 2031, 2032, but well, that's like a 50x, right? And when you see growing, I mean, you can nitpick on margins, like, well, energy margins are growing and the energy business is growing faster than the car business. Like, how far out do you have to go before you see, wait a minute, let's suppose FSD never happens,
Hmm.
right? And the car business 10x's and the energy business 50x's, and the car margins stay flat, but the
Hmm.
energy margins grow. Well, if you do the math on that, you figure out, wait a minute, margins end up looking pretty good in 2030. And I don't see a constraint on energy getting that big. I don't know if I don't see where the limitation is on energy growing like that. And there's
It's
little details
batteries.
that
Yeah.
there's little details that weren't in the earnings call that I think a lot of
Mm.
people missed. It was on X, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 days ago, that battery prices in China are down.
Hmm.
The cost of lithium ion batteries, of nickel-based batteries and iron phosphate batteries are down because I guess the crunch on demand from the economic situation has led to less people buying EVs than expected, and the battery factories had ramped up expecting more demand for their batteries,
Yeah.
and that has driven down the price of batteries, which lowers Tesla's cost in making vehicles, and it lowers Hyundai's cost in making vehicles, and it lowers BYD and
The ones who are
XPeng's.
selling. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think that when you're looking long term, we can see that battery costs are going to come down as they scale. There's a lot of little details that people miss, like when Drew Baglino was speaking at Stanford, he talked about how they have to basically rebuild the entire supply chain for batteries because the existing supply chain for batteries, a lot of it is built on like the side product of some other business, like the graphite for the anode is something that is a byproduct of fossil fuel industries. That graphite is produced and they just throw it away. Well, we'll buy it cheap, but they don't produce enough graphite at scale in that business to produce all the graphite they need for anodes. So you have to come up with a new way of producing graphite, and you end up figuring out a way to produce graphite that's more cost effective than the way they were doing it before, right? And then how do you get cathode at scale? Well, we're building a cathode facility. How do you get lithium refining done at scale? Well, we're building a lithium refining facility. Tesla is seeing that they have to remake the entire supply chain in order to bring costs down, and they're doing that. And I think there was a report maybe a week or two ago that the lithium refinery might even be ahead of schedule.
I
Did
didn't
you
hear
see
that
that
one.
one?
No.
Yeah, there was a report, like the guy who's in charge of the project in Corpus Christi. I think he said they're actually ahead of schedule
Hmm.
on opening the lithium refinery, and the cathode facilities coming. There's all these positive things that are happening with Tesla that if you just look in isolation and say, oh, margins were down, 0.3%, 0.3%, like you're missing the metrics that matter. The metrics that matter are they laying the groundwork for the growth to
Yeah.
satisfy the future that's
I
coming?
was debating with people just last week of what is the biggest news for Tesla that happened. This is prior to the earnings call last week. And my answer, which nobody said, was it was cattle factory opening up in
Oh, 80,
which
80
is
gigawatt
next
hours.
80 gigawatt hours, which is equivalent to 800,000 cars opening up next door to Giga Shanghai. I mean that's a pretty big deal, and I think that's huge because batteries are the rate limiting step for everything. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think you're actually understating that because it's 800,000 cars at 100 gigawatt hours a car, and the
that's
cars in China are
they
closer to 50 gigawatt hours. So it's really
50
more
or
like
75.
1.5. It's really
Yeah,
more like 1.5 million vehicles.
it could be even lower.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this was good. So, you and I are similar in that we're both long term bulls. We look at the business, we look at the market. Gyrations like the margins this quarter doesn't affect us as much. But of course, I'm an investor. So I don't want to see the stock go down. But I like to also talk to the short term traders, the institutional firms. They've all done a downgrade in the stock. Uh, Certainly, you and I agree that the next 6 months, even maybe the year, it's going to be flat unless these other things happen, right? Some sort.
I,
What big thing might happen? That's more of a story part of the business instead of the margins.
well, here's what's coming next year. First of all, Cybertruck is going to, I think people are massively underestimating the impact of Cybertruck on Tesla sales.
Yeah.
It's not that Cybertruck's going to come out and Cybertruck is going to sell a high volume. It's Cybertruck's going to come out and people are going to see it and go, "What the hell is that?"
Mhm.
And when Cybertruck is out on the road in volume, then people are going to want to know what that is. And then, oh, it's a Tesla. Wait, I want to know more about Tesla. And they go into a Tesla store and like, well, we don't have any Cybertrucks, but do you want to buy a Model 3? Do you
Mhm.
want to buy a Model Y? You want to buy a Model X? And all of a sudden, people see this amazing vehicle and they want to know more. And
Mhm.
when you talk about building the brand, what's going to build the brand more? An ad on the Super Bowl or a Cybertruck driving down the road that lots of people see? I think Cybertruck is going to be a massive. First of all, Tesla already has the strongest brand, but this is
Mhm.
like a massive brand builder that people are missing. And then as you go through, not so much this coming quarter, this quarter, the Q4, but as you go into 2024, I think we can expect there's going to be another AI Day event.
Mhm.
Version 12 of FSD is going to be in cars. My guess is early 2024. We're going to see version
Mhm.
12 in cars, and that's going to be an improvement. And then version 12 is going to learn faster. And then you're going to have more compute coming online as Dojo grows and they integrate the H100 cluster. So you're going to see FSD improving faster. And FSD improvement is like we don't know when it's going to cross a threshold. There's a decent chance it crosses the threshold in 2024. And when I say cross
I
the
think so
threshold,
too.
I mean they remove the nags.
Yeah.
You can sit in the car, you have to stay in the driver's seat, you have to pay attention. Sorry, you don't have to pay attention anymore, but you have to be ready to take over if the car says, "Hey, I need you to take over now." I think we crossed that threshold. I mean, I'm kind of like Elon. I've been over optimistic about that, but I think there's a good chance we cross that threshold. I'm not saying it becomes a robo taxi in 2024,
Mhm.
but I'm saying it crosses a threshold to where you have to stay in the driver's seat, but you don't have to pay attention anymore, at least for periods of time. Like on the highway, it says, "Hey, you can go ahead and look at your phone now." Um, that's a step along the way to full autonomy, right? So I think we're going to see things like that. I think we're going to see maybe there'll be another battery day. Maybe there'll be some a next generation vehicle event where they start talking about, okay, this is where we are in the next gen vehicle. Are they going to do another presentation like that will get us excited? What are they going to do at the Cybertruck reveal? Maybe they're going to tell us more about the next gen vehicle at the Cybertruck reveal event. We don't know. Maybe the Roadster is going to finally come out. I haven't seen any progress on Roadster, any hints of real progress on Roadster, but maybe Roadster comes out. Actually, I wanted to ask you about this. Model S and Model X have really fallen off. This is a spot where I recognize that the Tesla team knows more than I do. I say it's time to rip the Band-Aid off.
Agreed.
Stop bothering
we had this conversation. I agree.
Yeah. So, people say I don't agree. I think it may be time to rip the Band-Aid off and say, okay, we're going to clear this space up so we can actually produce Roadster, or we can actually produce a next generation X. I think they don't have the engineering resources for it right now, but exactly. I think if they stopped S and X, would people view that as a positive or a negative? I don't know.
Well, I
would view it as positive.
Yeah. I think the people will think, just knee-jerk reaction is, oh, Tesla needs to have a car in every segment, and then they're going to go, that must be negative. But actually, in fact, it's such tiny little numbers compared to the Model 2, the Model 3, the Model Y. And I already told you, even the Cybertruck doesn't make sense. It's actually a big deal in the US, but not a big deal anywhere else. And so they should have just focused on the compact. But that's
Cybertruck, if they can get Cybertruck to 1 million units a year, that matters. And if there's going to be a van based on the Cybertruck platform,
if it's based on the Cybertruck,
and that's another 1 million units a year, that matters. It is in that spreadsheet that led to the Project Highland story. The van is listed as being on the Cybertruck platform. So that's another example of something. That's another example that could be announced in 2024 is we're doing a van. If they announce we're doing a van, that could be something that wakes people up too.
I think so. Okay. Thank you so much, Warren. This is fantastic. I really do enjoy these conversations with you. You make me optimistic. Appreciate you. Follow him on YouTube at Warren Reglich, and of course his X account as well. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Herbert.